I'm going to be the co-chair. So in case there are technical problems, that's going to be my competence, but the meaningful discussion will be led by the respectable assistant professor of Department of English and Literature in the University of Balamand, Lebanon. And Olga Leonidovna, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Olesya Alexeyevna, and everyone, dear colleagues, welcome to section 6. Рада приветствовать вас в секции номер 6. The theme of section 6 is theory and methods of foreign language teaching at the tertiary level. The working language is English. As Olesya Alexeyevna said, we are the co-moderators of this section. There are 6 presentations in the section, and we have participants joining from Croatia, Russia, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And hopefully the internet will work well for all of us. The presentations focus on the methods of teaching languages in the rapidly changing world, the world that's becoming increasingly digital. And in particular, we'll talk about the use of technology for teaching foreign languages, various aspects of online or blended teaching and learning using multimodality in L2 writing, and we'll talk about the theory and practice of teaching languages in English, Arabic, and Russian, teaching these languages as a foreign language. The duration of each presentation is 10 minutes. Please try to stay within the time limit. And after each presentation, we'll have a small discussion of about 10-15 minutes. I would like to invite Ms. Dr. IVANA GRABAR to present first. And just one small request, during the presentations of our colleagues, please keep your microphones muted.
Okay.
Ms. IVANA GRABAR, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So today I have the honor to present at this all-Russian conference, and I'm very happy to be able to participate online, if not in person, which was the original idea. Okay, I'll start sharing my screen. I hope everything will go well. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm a teacher of English at University North in Croatia. I've been doing the teaching job for more than 11 years now, and I love teaching, and I also love researching everything that has to do with teaching. So the topic of today's lecture is how to use technology in teaching and learning English at tertiary level based on the example of a short study conducted at my university. So we all know, as you mentioned already, so with the appearance of this pandemic, we had a case where digital communication has gained a lot more importance than it actually was the case before. So we as teachers had to react really fast. We had to adapt our teaching, which was usually conducted face-to-face in classroom. We had to conduct it online. Of course, it's not like no online activities were used before, but they were usually used as an additional help to teaching, usually by using learning management systems. Of course, this was shown to be quite challenging for students, even though they are digital generation, but also for teachers, because there are some teachers who are just afraid of using technology in classroom for various reasons. But we all need to be aware that using technology does have certain benefits for learners, which can also be found in literature. So how successful was this adjustment to using digital tools, and was it as successful as expected, was basically the reason why I found motivation to do this short research. So I was interested and motivated by the fact to see how new technologies in this foreign language teaching can provide support for learning for students in a slightly different environment than they were actually used to. So I wanted to see how students perceive this online learning and how they feel about it in comparison with the usual face-to-face classroom learning. So how do they work on their skills and how satisfied they actually are. So the study that I conducted to achieve these goals was conducted in March, or during March and June. Basically, in the second week of March, we had to go fully online. And instead of only 2 weeks of lockdown, we ended up doing online teaching until the end of the semester. Of course, this was a great opportunity for me, both as a teacher and a researcher, to give students a questionnaire by using Merlin as an open source Moodle system. I created 36 questions, which were analyzed later by using descriptive statistics. And it has to be said that the students participated on voluntary basis. As you can see on the slide, there were only 29 students who actually filled in the questionnaire. So the students of business and management in University Center in Koprivnica and students of mechanical engineering, they filled in the questionnaire at the end of June 2020. So after their lessons finished, and since it was done voluntary, I didn't make them fill in the questionnaire. So I wanted to receive information from those students who were interested in doing the lessons in this way. They were ideal, even though there were only 29 of them, they were ideal because they could compare both learning environments, because during the winter semester they had their lessons conducted face-to-face. And in the end, it turned out that they were a good presentation of the population of our students. So the majority of them are part-time students, female, and somewhere around the age of 23. So the questionnaire consisted of questions which required students to give their direct answers, but also I used the Likert scale, 5-point Likert scale, to find out something about their attitudes, perceptions, and the ideas that actually they had considering the English language. So the first set of questions was dedicated to how frequently they used usual devices that are useful for online learning, such as PCs, laptops, tablets, or smartphones. And a surprising fact was that smartphone was used most frequently, so several times a day, for online learning for various purposes of online learning. And they actually gave it advantage over computers, which were in literature considered to be the device which is most often used. So having smartphones close to them obviously made them use them even for online learning, and the tablet was the least used device. Now, this next set of questions was related to using technology in general in learning and teaching. So based on their answers, we could see that they have quite a positive attitude to using computer-mediated communication for purposes of online learning. And we know that the benefits of collaborative environments was already proven in the literature. One thing that they are aware of is that technology enhances the level of teaching. So they do perceive technology as something useful. And it is interesting that the vast majority of them actually see that it's important for the teachers to use new technologies. Of course, this does make sense since they are a digital generation and they're used to various new things in technology. So they do expect teachers to follow the lead also. The next set of questions was related to quality of learning through a course without online components, with some online components, and through a completely online course. And their answers were mostly inclined towards a course with some online components. This is a great thing because we've been aware of the affordances that blended learning offers to teachers and students. So we could say that students recognize the value, and their positive inclination towards its use should be used by teachers as a way to maybe do some of the teaching online, so to have a blended learning environment. Now, Merlin, or open source Moodle learning management system, so it's the one that we use at our university. So the next set of questions was dedicated to Merlin as a system which they mostly use during their online courses. So they use it several times a week, which is a normal thing because they didn't use it only for the English lessons, but also for some other lessons. Their attitude towards using it is positive, probably because they see it as quite simple, so it's quite clear how things should be done. They also see it as a useful tool. As you can see, the numbers are quite high when it comes to their positive attitude. It even makes learning more interesting, but it also increases their productivity. This was something that I found quite important as a teacher. So they felt more productive when using Merlin. The next set of questions was related to online learning in general. So they had to compare online learning and classroom learning. And they actually gave a small advantage to online learning, which came as a surprise because I thought that they would still prefer classroom learning. I apologize. They actually prefer it, even though they consider online learning to be a little more demanding than face-to-face learning. Another interesting thing is that they consider that the quality of course doesn't change or doesn't depend on whether the course is done online or in the classroom, and they believe that they would gain the same amount of knowledge if they were in the classroom. So basically, we can see that their attitude towards online learning in general is quite positive. As I told you, since I was their teacher, I was also interested in how they feel or how they felt about English language course. So if they had to do it again, completely online, they would be ready and they would be willing to follow the course online. Of course, using various video conferencing platforms, I used Zoom in my teaching, would actually speak in favor of their readiness to follow the course synchronously. So they do not prefer that much having pre-recorded lessons or tasks or activities. They like having this direct communication with the teacher. They would be ready to use Merlin and Zoom. And what I was really happy about, that they were satisfied with the course. So all 29 participants were satisfied with the course. And they even considered to this semester that was conducted online to be of better teaching quality. I was satisfied with that answer because, well, it was kind of a pat on the back for me as a teacher. So they consider it easier to do various activities and tests online using Merlin. And they were also satisfied with the communication with teacher and how the teaching was actually done. So their satisfaction was extremely high. So basically, we could make some possible conclusions based on their answers. I said possibles because we had a convenient sample, but they were ideal because they're probably the only ones who have the opportunity to compare doing a course fully face-to-face and then doing the course fully online. So I have this tentative conclusion. So it's interesting that they would use smartphones. So why not, as teachers, use smartphones in regular face-to-face teaching for various purposes? They like technology, so the teacher should work on themselves and their skills, their technological skills, to be closer to their students. Use blended learning environment and combine it with real-time classes, whether done online or face-to-face, because they're ready and they're aware of the benefits that technology brings. So the teachers and researchers should be aware of various digital tools that help students not only follow the courses, but they become in charge of the whole learning process, and it can foster their learning autonomy. So in the end, I would like to pose two questions. So were we ready for the semester? Not really, to be honest. But then again, were we successful? I believe we were, and I believe that this study showed that students learned how to appreciate what teacher does for them, and we could say that we were successful. And one thing that we can all say that we are more experienced now, if nothing else. And as I usually tell my students, well, they have to do certain things on their own, and by using blended learning environment, in this way, they can actually show what they can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I will start perhaps with questions, and then other participants will join. It's very important to conduct such research so that it gives us an idea how effective our classroom practices are. My question is about the participants in this research. Do you think if you had more students answering the questions, the questionnaire questions, would you get different results? Because I see they were very enthusiastic, and overall it received they responded positively to what was happening in the classroom. Maybe the ones who were not too happy did not participate. Could you please talk about this?
Yes, thank you for that question. So as I said, it was voluntary. I never pressure my students into doing anything. They're all adults and they can do whatever they want, basically. Yes, I would believe that the greater number of participants would give, I wouldn't say different results, but more reliable results. Because when I talked to the students, they all had quite positive attitude. This one is just in the written form. So the number 29 is small. This is like 1/3 of students who actually are enrolled into the courses, but actually this is half the number that actually follow the courses actively online. So even though there was somebody who was not that satisfied, it would be interesting to have that kind of an opinion too, but I believe that the results in majority wouldn't change that much based on the contact that I had with my students. But I would love to have a bigger sample, definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I have a question. Thank you for the wonderful report. I think we are all building the foundation for a large meta-analysis when all professors all over the world have samples like that, and then somebody is going to analyze like 300 works from different universities. That would be so valuable. And I had a question about the sample again, so but more about the level where. So you say that they are part-time students, but they're bachelor students.
Yes, bachelor students.
And then because they're part-time, is it characteristic for this level to be more like fresh graduates out of school, or are they older, more like reliably equipped people who already work and do something else in their lives so that they have the technology?
Yeah, thank you. So as you could see, the average age was 23. So students in Croatia usually graduate at 18. So basically they enrolled into universities in their bachelors when they're 18 or 19. Part-time students are older. Well, we have some students who are 50, but they are in minority. Generally, students between 20 and 30, this is probably the age of part-time students. One thing, and one of the reasons why I find this study very useful is in particular for those part-time students. Very often they cannot follow the courses face-to-face because they have to work. So this is a perfect opportunity for me as a teacher and for them as a students to use this these affordances that technology offers to follow the courses online in a way that enables them to either have the materials available or do various activities at their own time. So in this way, they are equipped with the knowledge using technology because they maybe use it at work. But me as a teacher would probably have to give them some guidelines on how to use technology for that particular purpose. I don't know, wikis or forums, they would need to have some additional explanation on how to use them purposefully. Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, totally. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Dear colleagues, please.
Okay, Omar.
Yes, please. Dr. Omar Adra.
Yes, thank you very much for this. Let me start the video. I think I'm not on the camera. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Actually, my thinking is, while you were presenting, I couldn't but think of our own students in Lebanon. We have a good number of students who really sometimes struggle with connectivity problems. And some of them reside in suburban or rural areas where internet connection may not be always reliable and might fail them sometimes. Do you think that such kind of internet experience might in a way or another shape the perceptions of the participants and maybe make them a little bit apathetic about their learning experience under such circumstances?
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, I believe that it could have some effect. In Croatia, we have a situation when internet connections are really good, or quite good, I would say, quite good, because there are certain areas that have problems. During one of my classes, we had a big storm and half of the students suddenly disappeared. So it was quite an experience. The thing is that I believe that when doing classes directly online, of course, internet connection is important. Maybe students have presentations and then they have problems presenting, but everything can be, well, not everything, or most of it can be avoided. So they could pre-record their presentation, and then in case something happens, the presentation could be sent to the teacher or uploaded on a learning management system. Or, for example, if we talk about various activities that they can do online, they don't have to do it immediately during the course, but they can actually do it, I don't know, in the evening when the internet connection is slightly better. So I believe that we as teachers should always bear in mind that there are students who have problems with internet connection. And we should think about how to avoid this, or how to help these students not to feel worse than other students who have better connections. So maybe think of some other activities, or how to do activity in a different way so that everybody can be satisfied and included in the process of teaching and learning, of course.
Thank you very much.
It would be interesting to find out how your students would perceive the whole story of online learning from the point of view of somebody who doesn't have a good internet connection.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I agree, because frustration, it might be one of the words that would appear in the answers to such questions, but because of the economic crisis, and some areas have electricity for 2 hours only, and the internet gets disrupted all the time. So yes, everyone welcomes online education, but there are areas where, well, there are other reasons that it might not be as successful. But it's, yes, I agree with you. It would be interesting to compare the answers of students from areas where we have good connection and areas where they're somewhat disadvantaged because of that.
Yes.
Thank you, Ivana, for a wonderful report. And now I give floor to our next presentation, and I invite Olga Leonidovna Fleonova, the co-chair of this section and assistant professor of the Department of English Language and Literature at Balamand University, Lebanon, and the co-reporter, the co-speaker, Professor Adra Omar, Doctor of Education, assistant professor of the Department of English Language and Literature, the same department, the same university. You're welcome.
Thank you. We're joining you from Lebanon. Omar will be the main presenter, and I will then join during the question answer time.
Thank you, Olga. All right. Welcome again. I'm very much just like my colleague previously said, We are joining at a time when, you know, things are not going very well for us in this country, but we're still so excited about having to present in an international conference. I, for one, am presenting for the first time in a conference that is organized in Russia, and I thank you all for the opportunity that you have given us to present this. I'm going to be sharing my PowerPoint presentation now. I hope you can start. Can you please tell me if you do see it?
We can see your presentation and your full screen, so you can start the slides at this point. Yes, everything is perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So my colleague, Dr. Fleonova, and I examined the students' perceptions regarding the benefits and challenges of incorporating multimodal elements in L2 academic writing. Maybe a couple of clarifications are due now, so that we explain a couple of terms related to our study. First, what's a multimodal text? And this is the text we had our students produce as part of their writing requirements in an EFL course. In our context, students take English as a foreign language courses in a certain sequence, and they take this particular course, it's called English 204, which I'm going to be talking about later, as the exit course that satisfies the requirements of taking English language courses before they, or as they actually take their other major courses. That's why what we did is that we had our students in those particular courses experience or experiment with a production of a multimodal text. To define this first, a multimodal text, as you can see, exceeds the alphabetic mode and includes other modes of meaning making, including sound, graphic, and photographic images and digital content. And the term multimodal literacy, which originates in social semiotics, is cited in the literature by experts in the field as a very important skill to acquire in the 21st century. And that's why there's growing body of research that looks into the potential of such modes of meaning making. And the research has revealed both benefits and struggles, or obviously challenges. Specific attention from scholars and practitioners in the field of composition and communication have emerged recently. This is an ongoing kind of the interest goes back to 2 or 3 decades, but the actual focus of the research in L2 pedagogy is quite recent, and despite all of this growing body of research and the interest and people's positive perceptions generally of actually trying to experiment with this for the benefit of the students and as learners, to a certain extent, the learner's written production remains predominantly monomodal, and I'll explain what that is. It is based exclusively on the written word or the alphabet in the form of a linear word-only, sentence-only production. Our research questions centered on 2 main aspects of the students' perceptions, and this comes from our belief that is very important to study learners' perceptions, and their beliefs and their attitudes, to a certain extent shape their learning experience. And that's why their motivation and willingness to engage in activities depends to a large extent to how relevant they see such activities. And this made us, Dr. Fleonova and I look into 2 aspects of this issue. What perceived benefits do our students report regarding this experiment or the incorporation of multimodal elements in their writing, and whether they think there are certain challenges that they have experienced while employing those modes. So what we did is that we looked at the literature and we tried to see the most relevant, the most recent ones about the possibilities and challenges of a multimodal approach to teaching. And we realized that most of the studies we have been able to find and read focused primarily on the teacher perceptions, and there was less attention given to the learner perceptions, which to us, as we said, is a major component of this. The benefits that were mentioned in those sources seem to focus on a list of items, which you can see right there on the screen. Definitely engagement and motivation happens to be on top of the list in many of those studies, but also opportunities for creativity, the aesthetic appeal, a better understanding of audience, and an improved communication skill, not to mention enhanced critical thinking, were mentioned in the studies that you see down there at the bottom of the screen. These are the three major citations of the benefits of multimodal composition. Now, when it came to the challenges, which, by the way, an eye-opener here was like we were able to find more challenges than benefits in recent literature on the topic. These included, first and foremost, the participants claiming that this was an unfamiliar style to them in writing, and that they had the difficulty adapting their linear texts, which they are so much used to, the so-called conventional writing, to the requirement of multimodal composition, which was quite something new and something they are not very familiar with, as I already said. So the value of whether or not multimodal writing is of more importance than conventional was to them something they were skeptical a little bit about. Their preoccupation with the technical aspect of the assignment, at the expense of having to maybe not give so much importance to the development of academic language. And in this regard, the emphasis on appearance rather than content was cited in literature as well. Finally, the time and effort that was being spent, using or putting together these kinds of assignments, which necessitated that they become not only like consumers of information, but also producers of information, which to them was maybe something not very much something possible, maybe something challenging. And here's what we did in order to find out the perceptions of our participants in this study. Our study focused on students taking an EFL course called ENGL 204. This is an exit course in our university. Our university is a private university in Lebanon, which is like maybe more than 30 years old. It was established in 1988. Students in this university come from different disciplines. And students have to take English courses to satisfy their graduation requirements. English 204 happens to be the exit course. And in this course, students have to produce 1,500 words in the form of a term paper on a sociolinguistic topic. 2 sections participated in this study, a total of 45 students coming from different disciplines such as biology, physical education, psychology, mechanical and civil engineering, a medical lab, nursing, and other majors. Actually, it was a very nice combination. It was quite eclectic from different majors and represented different points of view. Some of the samples that our students produced, we thought it would be maybe worthwhile that we share with you some of those samples that they were expected to produce by the end when they submit their term paper. These included, for example, something like what you see in front of you, or maybe simply charts and tables that reveal certain figures, or maybe a timeline depicting a certain, storytelling, order of things in a chronological way, in the form of graphs and charts, like we said. And, some of them would still prefer to submit something that is only monomodal, just like you see in front of you, which is made up of words and lines only. What we did is that we administered our study in this way. We employed 2 research instruments in the form of an online survey and a series of focus group interviews. What we did is that first we administered the survey, and almost 2/3 of our student population took this survey. 28 out of 45 students did that. And then we conducted focus group interviews, and 9 students participated in those. An inductive approach was used to analyze the data from the open-ended questions of the survey and the semi-structured interviews. In front of you is a sample of the analysis that we this is the way how we reported this. When we looked at the focus group interviews, the transcripts, certain themes emerged, obviously, which you can find on the left. Some quotes were inserted to just like exemplify this theme, and then the sources, whether from the survey or from the focus group, were indicated on the right-hand side. Overall, the students reported a positive experience using multimodal elements in their writing, actually a good number of them. And I can here look at the numbers. Actually, 50% said that they were very beneficial. 46.4% said that they were beneficial. That's a total of like 96% reporting quite a positive impression of their experience. But to be specific, we wanted them to look at certain specific benefits, and these benefits, of course, as reported by the students, matched some of the findings that we were able to see in the literature that we read about the topic. And right here in front of you is a list of those which I'm going to allow you please to take a look at in the form of bullet points. But also challenges were mentioned. And again, this is a list of some of the challenges that the students cited, whether in an open-ended questions to the surveys or during the focus group interviews, as some of the problems that they might encounter or that they have encountered while executing the task, the written task. And this brings us to the general findings and a discussion of those findings. And Dr. Fleonova and I, we thought about this and we during our reflection sessions when we talked about the issue, we often mentioned how much like this kind of approach to teaching has a place in science subjects, and we're aware that this would probably be fitting in a science subject environment when such subject is being taught. But we also see that there is merit of experimenting with such kinds of assignments in an L2 setting, particularly when teaching writing for academic purposes. Actually, we actually think that these kind of innovative practices in the classroom, and as we said, depend on the learner's perception one way or another. And when students have a positive perception towards this might actually end up to be a learning experience that they see some relevance to in their lives, first in their academic lives in the classroom and in their academic career in general, that they can transfer these kind of skills to other courses that they're taking, and definitely later on in life maybe in their employment settings. And this is something maybe worthwhile investigating further. Definitely, the findings. I'm going to wrap up. Yes. I'll wrap up. Sure. Sorry about this. I went overboard, I think. All right. The findings of the study cannot be overgeneralized because it's a small one. And this in front of you is one of the limitations. Of course, the two other limitations I'm not going to go into, but they can be found in our paper. I will only end very briefly with two major recommendations. First, this study gave us the impression that this can be something that we want to experiment with in other sections of the same course. As we said, this was only experimented with 2 sections out of many, like around 12 that we give in this course. But also these also can be replicated, and it's the recommendation of, like Dr. Fleonova and I recommend that our curriculum designers in this university, the ones who are responsible for L2 writing courses, that they tap onto the potential of adopting such a strategy in teaching writing, not only in this level, maybe in other levels as well, even if those levels are offered to students of a lower proficiency. Thank you very much. And this was our list of references.
Thank you very much for a wonderful report, and I would like the audience to have, can you please leave the presentation on, because maybe the audience will ask to get back to some slide. Thank you. And if anyone has questions, will you please tune on your microphone and comment? Call for questions. And while the audience is thinking, I have a question myself. So would you please elaborate a little bit? What type of text were the students creating as a result? Was it a scientific paper or a literary work, or what kind of aim did you have in mind giving them this task?
Olga, would you like to answer?
Yes, I will answer this question. Because in these sections, because of the context we have, students who join these sections come from different majors, as Omar has mentioned. We have students from business, engineering students, biology students, art students, and so on. We need to create courses that could cater to the interests of all these students. And usually we ask them to write about social linguistic topics. In this particular case, they had to look at the development of storytelling practices over time and how fairy tales, for example, change over time, and how they reflect the social conditions of life. So they looked at storytelling practices and changes in fairy tales in the East and in the West. And they were asked to provide some historical background to this, and then analyze. Some chose to analyze data from the interviews. They interviewed people from their environment, and some chose to deal with Western story tales. Then it was a bit more theoretical. So this was the kind of writing. And they were provided with instructions when and how they could incorporate either charts or tables or pictures for illustrations, diagrams, and so on. So, but the requirement was that all papers should include 2-3 multimodal elements. It means elements of a different semiotic nature.
Thank you very much. And any other questions? Yes.
Can I ask?
Mr. Hyun, please, and then IVANA will be next. IVANA.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question regarding the difficulties you faced when grading these assignments. Like, was it harder if it was only monomodal compared to the multimodal aspect of these assignments?
All right, I will answer the question also myself, because we experimented with this in my 2 sections. Right, first of all, assessment was not the focus of this research, but I understand the importance of addressing this issue, and the literature on the subject does discuss this topic at length. Yes, do we give students who have fancy, colorful papers a higher grade, or how do we deal with it? Well, first of all, we need to look at these elements as an integral part of the content. We grade organization, development, content, language, mechanics. And in my grading rubric, it was part of the organization and development. So how logically they could incorporate such elements, because it wasn't only just a copy-paste of a picture somewhere in the text. They had to refer to it in the adjacent paragraph. Figure 1 describes table 2 analyzes, and so on. So I wouldn't say I experienced difficulties grading this. The part for the multimodal elements, as I said, was part of the assessment of the development and organization. And also with time, it wasn't my first semester. I've been experimenting with it for several semesters. With time, it gets faster. You approximately know what you are looking for. And prior to the assessment, you discuss it with students, in addition to written guidelines provided to them. Of course, when it's expanded to other sections of this level, as we expect to do this, norming with other teachers would help. We have this practice of teachers from different sections meeting together and discussing issues of assessment and also grading papers together. Yes, assessment is an important part when we talk about the incorporation of, on the one hand, we are surrounded by such things. As Omar said, we consume texts, multimodal texts, but we don't always produce them. And how we assess this element in writing, yes, it requires more attention. Did I answer the question?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. IVANA GRABAR had a question too.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking at your presentation. It was really interesting. And I believe all our students actually require this in order to write a final paper or some kind of a professional paper, it doesn't matter. So incorporating these multimodal elements is very useful. Now, my question is whether you as teachers have thought about how to deal with those challenges that you presented or that students perceive as challenges. So can you please tell me something about that, whether you thought about it or how to deal with that?
And it would be very helpful if
Yes,
you could
the
back to the
slide.
slide about challenges,
Yes.
please.
Okay.
Omar, if you could move to the slide about this.
Yeah.
No, oh, our findings.
This one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can answer part of this question,
right.
if you don't mind,
Right.
Olga,
Yes.
and then maybe Olga can take on. This is a very interesting question. Thank you very much for this. Actually, let me start with bullet number 2, questioning the task value itself. I mean, eventually, we are only the products of the school system we were in, the university education we have received, and the kind of this classical or traditional paradigm that we are so much used to in the conventional sense that we are used to, for example, writing and asking students to write a 131 essay that is made up of an introduction and 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion. And this to us in our minds is what it should be. So first, having to come to terms with the idea of shifting from this kind of a conventional or so-called traditional style of writing to a multimodal one, something that had to involve a lot of discussion among us, you know, as practitioners in the field. And I have to say, several of our colleagues are resistant to the idea. So although this was part of my doctorate thesis, which I presented in 2015, and I've been working at this university for many, many years, it's been 6 years that I have communicated the results of my doctoral study. And so far, this hasn't really been implemented across different levels and sections. And the reason behind this is because of the resistance of the faculty. So definitely this is something worth talking about. But at the same time, what we thought would be an important issue to address and maybe then be able to sell to the administration and to the students is that we deal with any technical difficulties and those mechanics that we talked about. And actually, there is a way we need to get some kind of a support from the IT department, maybe from colleagues who work in different, for example, the education department. I was able to get many different resources from our colleagues who can give us ways like certain software or platform that can help us incorporate these kind of elements in a successful way. Now, the time factor will always remain a problem. It is always important to tell students ahead of time, just like Olga said, give them clear guidelines, supply them with a rubric that tailors, that depicts very clearly what they're expected to do, and do this ahead of time so that they have the time, you know, that the time factor does not represent a major source of stress for them. Olga, if you'd like to add to what I said, please go ahead.
Right. So just, you know, to comment on some other points maybe from here. Yes, it requires more time and effort because they're used to the other kind of writing. They get it out of the way fast, but here they need to stop and think about how to incorporate these elements. And sometimes they just don't fit into their text. Well, I would say a bit of psychological preparation helps, conversations with students about the importance of this kind of writing, and they all agree eventually that this is what they need for their major courses, and many of them continue at the master's level and at the master's level, they need all these skills. They do consume text like this in the form of readings for their majors and in the English classroom, but somehow we don't ask them to produce them. So just talking about this helps. Then dividing it into smaller tasks. Usually it happens that we give students a topic, we give guidelines, we talk about it, and then the date when they should submit the research paper. Here it was divided into smaller tasks and with deadlines for each small task. So this difficulty was addressed. And to help them with the mechanics of incorporating and referencing multimodal elements, also guidelines, examples were provided, and there was constant conferencing and discussion with students about these issues. But yes, if these issues are not addressed, these challenges might provoke a negative response on the part of the students, because they are quite busy with other courses and they just want to get English out of the way, and more work in English is always perceived negatively. But overall, students reported that they did see the value of it after this course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I guess we can, unless there are any other questions, we can move on now to our next speaker. And Mr. Adra, could you please turn off the presentation? Yes, thank you. Okay. And our next speaker is going to be from Lebanon again, and I invite Ms. Zahra Sahyun, the Department of English and Literature from the University of Balamand. I'm sorry, Balamand, Lebanon again. So you're welcome to share your screen if you need a presentation.
Actually, I would like to introduce Zahra a bit more. She used to be our student at the master's program, but now she's a teacher in Saudi Arabia. She's joining us from Saudi Arabia.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to present my study. Now I will share my PowerPoint. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can see it. You can, we see, yes, now
Yes.
everything's
Full
perfect.
screen. Yes, now we see your full screen.
Okay, so my study basically examined the interaction of non-native speakers engaged in WEBEX-mediated group work activities. First, I would like to clarify why I want to focus on group work. When I first became an English teacher, I was advised to include group work activities in my classes, like all the time, by the coordinator, by any workshop I attended. When I did that and I observed my students, I noticed that not all of them were engaged, not all of them were using the target language, which is English. So I looked for research on this topic. I wanted to see if there had been studies that examined students' interaction in communicative activities. However, I noticed that studies that focused on classroom interaction focused more on teacher-student interaction, more than on interaction between students. And these studies were done in a different setting than our setting. They were done in an ESL setting where the target language is spoken outside of the classroom. In my case, it was EFL. English was not spoken outside of the classroom. And after the pandemic, universities in Lebanon switched to online learning, which tends to be teacher-centered. So it was important to see how we can make it more student-centered and examine the application of these communicative activities when implemented in an online course. So my research questions are basically what this course features are evidence in non-native speakers, EFL, students' output during WEBEX-mediated group work activities. By output here, I'm focusing on the spoken discourse of students as well as the chat, since using WEBEX allowed them to use both audio, video, and also a chat. And I wanted to look at their language choices as well as what type of utterances they produced. And since our students came from a similar first language background, they shared their native language, which is Arabic. It was important to understand the impact of this shared L1 on their interaction when we put students in groups. So group work is important, as been advocated by Swain, by Long, by Varani and Glass, because when students produce the language, this promotes second language acquisition. Long and Varani and Glass not only give importance to producing the language, but also gave it a social aspect in which students should produce the target language, but it should be done like in activities that are communicative, such as group work. So since this study is being done online, it was important to see what had been done in this field, what had been explored in this field. It was noticed that most studies that examined interaction in an online medium focused on chat. Students were interacting using chat. In our case, they were using, as I said, video, audio, and also chat. And students did not share their first language. They were like, some of them had Arabic as their native language, some of them had Russian or a different first language background. Also, they were in an ESL context where the target language is or English is being spoken outside of the classroom. And one difference also in our study, in each group we had 3 to 4 members. However, previous studies focused more on pair groupings. There were only 2 students in each group. This study is an exploratory case study which employed a mixed method approach, qualitative and quantitative. Data collection was done through audiovisual recordings of the interaction. Sampling was purposeful. The sampling consisted of 36 students who were enrolled in an English freshman course. Data and qualitative data analysis was done by coding the utterances or the spoken as well as utterances produced using chat, coding them according to themes that are derived from Long and Varani and Glass. So here our focus is not only about the language choice, but also what type of utterances was used by these students. I looked specifically at clarification requests, whether they were asking questions, whether they were asking their friends for help or for comprehension, whether they were repeating, and so on. After coding these utterances, they were counted and their percentages were calculated. So as a phase 1, a pilot study was conducted to test the feasibility of recording to spot any technical difficulties that might arise. In phase 2, students were engaged in a simulation project. They had to design or to create an NGO which could fit in their context, and activities ranged from 7 to 45 minutes and actually amounted to 302 minutes of transcribed data. After that, the analysis was done and findings were reported. Now in my study, the findings are reported as answers to research questions. So to answer the first research question, which focused on the output of students, output features, it was noticed that L2 was, or English, was spoken for 48.57% of the total time, and including the negotiation of meaning, such as questions and responses to these questions. However, negotiation of meaning was only 10.8% of the total time. Students switched also to their L1, to Arabic, for 33.99% of the total times. So this is the distribution again of the negotiation of meaning categories. Clarification request was the most used type among long categories, and comprehension checks was the least used type. So this is an example of a clarification request. One student was asking for clarification after her or his friend wrote something in the chat. This is an example of a confirmation check. One student was asking for, their friend for their opinion on what they had done. So what do these percentages mean? The high number of clarification requests showed that when students are both non-native speakers, they did not hesitate. They asked their friends to explain more. And this is not the case when we put a native speaker with a non-native speaker. In that case, students feel hesitated to ask for help and to ask for clarifications. And this is actually due to what is explained by Varani and Das as something related to the equal linguistic status when we put non-native speakers together. When we compare the percentages with other studies, in our case, it was only 10.8% of negotiation. It was way less than, for example, the study of Smith. It was 30% of negotiation, and this could be due to the shared L1. When we compare the routines or the type of interaction, and because students in our case, in each group we had 3 to 4 members, students received more responses because basically they were talking to more than one person, to more than one peer at the same time. This is one example of a more dynamic interaction, receiving many responses and producing many reaction to responses. Regarding now the impact of the shared L1, which is Arabic again, it was the findings show that students switched to Arabic for 33.9% of the total time, and this actually reduced the amount of L1, the amount of L2, which reduced also the opportunities for second language acquisition, because students, instead of asking or creating questions in the target language, they switched to Arabic to ask their friends to explain or to elaborate on something. So overall, the interaction of students using WEBEX showed that students used the target language, they used the negotiation of meaning. However, because of the shared L1, if I can say, it reduced the opportunities for second language improvement and acquisition. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zahra. Now, question time. Yeah, okay.
Usual, I questions right away. So Zahra, I thank you for the wonderfully structured presentation, very well methodologically very accurate, and it's always a pleasure to see that kind of presentation. But I have a question about the target level, the level of English of the students you measured. So are they where do they fall within like CEFR A1, A2, B1, B2? Because the responses which you brought as examples, they're characteristic of some certain linguistic level of competence.
They actually were 101 students, and we put them, or they put them in 101 according to their IELTS score. And I believe their score was between 5.5 to 6 on the IELTS. So that's how they group them. And they actually use with these students, because they don't lack mechanics, they need to improve their communication. So that's why they include a lot of group work activities for these groups of students.
And is this the kind of program, education program, like university program, where all the education is in English or in Arabic?
It's an English medium university. So they had, before they start taking their their major courses, they had to have like certain level, and 101 is not the exit course. They had to also enroll in more, maybe I think they have critical discourse or something like that after they finish this level.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Zahra, you mentioned at the beginning that you were discouraged to use group work because your first experience in the classroom showed it wasn't effective. And now again, after your study, you say that what were the percentages? Close to 50% of the time students speak in Arabic?
33.
Okay, 33%, 1/3 of the time they switch to Arabic. Would you still consider including group work in your classrooms because of the high percentages of L1 use?
Yes, of course, I would still include it, and I would encourage other teachers who are working in a similar context to include it, even though they are switching to their L1 for like the third of the time. However, in our context, our students do not have any opportunities to practice their target language and to learn to improve their second language outside of the classroom. So even if it was only 50% of the time of using English, it's better, of course, than nothing at all. And it's also better than having teacher-centered classrooms where they are only receiving and listening to the teacher talking. They should also have some time, even if it's not a lot, it's conducive for their second language development.
Thank you. Yes, I see Omar Adra is raising his hand.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity, actually. I know a little bit about this study, and I know that this study was done in a context in a classroom where the teacher is a native speaker of English. My question to Zahra is, do you think the findings would probably emerge differently or would be different if the speaker of the teacher is a non-native speaker of English, is actually a speaker of Arabic? Would the occurrence of Arabic-speaking utterances maybe increase as a result?
Yes, actually, this could encourage students also to use Arabic with the teacher. But I believe, like as English teachers, we should be aware of this, and we should not give them the opportunity to speak Arabic with us. We should stick to English. Like here, I'm teaching in Saudi Arabia, and I cannot speak Arabic with my students. So I also want to note talk about something like even when the teacher was a native speaker, and while doing the recordings and then doing the transcriptions, it was noticed that when the teacher joins, they would like automatically switch to English, and when the teacher leaves, they would automatically switch to Arabic. So they had like this type of resistance to use Arabic all the time. But I still would do it again and would encourage all teachers to include group work.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the questions. Do we have more questions for Zahra Safiun? about output during group work, online group work. All right, thank you, Zahra, for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yes, please stop sharing. And our next presenter is Olesya Alexeyevna Valger, старший преподаватель. I'm sorry, I'm giving the describing the position in Russian. Старший преподаватель кафедры лингвистики и теории перевода. Olesya Alexeyevna is joining us from Novosibirsk State Pedagogical University. Olesya Alexeyevna, мы вас не слышим. Could you please turn on your microphone?
This was just a moment when my computer decided to glitch, and this is all very exciting, how we share international experience these days, like, you know.
Right.
My report, my presentation is based on another quantitative and qualitative study of students' perceptions. And I'm going to skip the part about definitions and the theory because my colleagues before me have said quite a lot about that. It's just that it still impresses me how universities all over the world struggled with the same things during March 2020 and how this experience shaped us up so much. So judging by the publications which were released during the last year, all universities globally shared the same problems like increased preparation time for the professors, higher workload for the faculty and staff, and there was no adaptation period for none of us. Also, many students and professors saw that period as temporary and lived in the situation of instability for a long time, hoping that this online distance education will end soon, and that's why we're reluctant to invest more effort or money and to go into more specific more specific preparation for the new form of classes. And also there were a lot of external crisis factors. As a result, there is a universal consensus that in the world, the accessibility and the quality of the higher education suffered a little bit in some cases and a lot in other cases, especially in the places which struggled even before that. And I, at some point, was struck by the idea that right now there is knowledge which is falling down on us like leaves, and it just stays on the ground and nobody picks it up. So as a result, one of my colleagues who is not here today with us, but she took part in the initial stage of the research, her name is Olesya Andreevna Skromina, and we decided to have a study of our students' perception of advantages, difficulties, and best practices of adaptation associated with the period of crisis distance learning during the 2020-2021 academic year. For our students in this sample, this period contained distance education during the period from September the 1st till the 15th of March. And we put 3 research questions. How do students evaluate the period of crisis distance learning? Do they do it as successful or normal or unbearable period? What are the major factors that polarize their opinion? What makes distance education unbearable or successful for a student? And what strategies and practices do students consider to be successful compensation for the disadvantages of crisis distance learning? So we designed the research in 2 stages. The first stage included the peer-reviewed journals review to see what struggles and practices other universities, other professors all over the world highlighted in this experience. Then we conducted, based on that literature review, we conducted in-depth interviews with volunteers, 10 students of different age, which roughly covered all of the levels, like first year, sophomores, third years, fourth years, and some students in our university have 5 years of education in their bachelor program, so we took one of them too. And after that, we designed the questionnaire and tested it with the same 10 students, so that we could see if quantitative data received by the questionnaire, by the pool, would correlate with the qualitative data which we received from the in-depth interviews. And as a result, we corrected the questionnaire a little bit, deleted some questions which were probably excessive and didn't bring new data, just repeated the same data which we got as a result. So our sample included 115 students of the general population size 558 students at that point. So we did not take students who graduated and they were in their 5th year and then they did not have the full experience at that point. And also we did not include first-year students in several programs. So we have several programs at our faculty, and some of the students have longer extended periods of education. The margin of error was calculated as 8.15%, which can let us give a chance, that gives us a chance that we have reliable, more or less reliable results. The questionnaire final design included questions which were open questions and multiple choice questions. So as a result, we applied the qualitative and quantitative content analysis for keywords in open questions, and the design of the questionnaire allowed us to compare results in various areas by means of the Kruskal-Wallis one-way analysis. That means that we, for example, can ask the students a question about their living conditions, then we see their results in their perception of online studies, and then we can combine these two questions and see if there is a correlation between where the students live and what influence it had and what kind of feedback they give about the distance education. So the questionnaire was pretty large, so I'm only going to show you the most interesting parts of the results. So some preliminary results here. So this is the distribution of our sample according to the year where they are in. And surprisingly for me, the year that struggled most was 3rd year. So people in the middle of their education, they reported more difficulties in all fields. While senior students before graduation, they report high satisfaction levels, and probably this is connected with the fact that they were better equipped for the transition, they had less technological competence constraints, they actually prefer distance learning to offline learning. And 2nd and 1st year students demonstrate a considerably higher polarization of opinion. That means that inside the 1st years and the 1st and the 2nd year student body, you have groups that are very enthusiastic about distance education, as well as groups that are very much against it and adhere to this opinion at all costs. Then if you take the background question about how far they live and how do they get to the university, a lot of the students, as you see, commute for more than 30 minutes one way. More than 50% of students have a long commute when they normally go to the university. And predictably, students who have longer commute perceive distance education as successful or normal. Oh, I'm sorry, less often. There is a mistake in the presentation. Let me correct it. Oh, no, I'm sorry, everything was fine. I was confused a little bit, I apologize. So the longer the student commutes, the more difficult it is for the student to get to the university, and the more enthusiastic they might be about distance learning because they escape a large part of their lives that gave them trouble before that. The living conditions also give a high polarization of opinion. So students who share a room and because they live in the dorm, or students who have other children, children under 18 in their family and they live in the same household and they share a room, their opinion is highly polarized against distance education. Condition which is totally unpreventable, uncompensated, and cannot be compensated by anything the university on behalf of the university. Then a lot of our students, especially in older years, have a job and they work part-time. And this was another background question which showed high correlation with the difference in the opinion. And then students who worked part-time from home and invested more money into preparation, into the equipment for distance learning or distance teaching in their case, since the beginning of the pandemic, they report high satisfaction levels with distance education. The students who do not have a part-time jobs, they report higher level of anxiety, and they totally succumbed to the whole struggle of distance education. The interesting thing is that other factors like financial welfare or returning to the parental household or changing the health level, they do not seem to have confident correlation with the students' perception of distance education. So only living condition, transport, commuting time, and having a part-time job offline were contributing to that experience in a measurable way. The content analysis showed that there were challenges that were mentioned more often and less often, and you can see the results in the slide. There is like the big top 5 challenges that the students mentioned: inadequate equipment which they had, too much screen time per day, so they were tired of staying so much time at their computers. They reported increased workload and the increase in monotonous written assignments, and also increased background stress, which was very explainable by the pandemic and the whole thing going on. The surprise is that the advantages which were mentioned, they fall into 2 groups. Like one group of 5 is mentioned often, and then these are the advantages which are mentioned by the majority, but the vast majority of the students. I remind you that the sample is 115 students. So these 4 are almost universal, and then the 5th is kind of pretty much for a lot of people. So there was no necessity to commute to the university, obviously the biggest advantage. It was easy to attend the classes if you were sick. So our students are responsible. They want to go to classes when they're sick. They suffer if they miss classes. And it is a big surprise and a pleasure for me. A lot of students mentioned better lunch options during break, which might be actually due to the reason that during the usual school year, they struggle to fit the lunch break into the education time. A lot of people mentioned that they could wear more comfortable clothes and no boots on your feet all day, which was a totally unexpected factor for me. But the keyword boots and shoes was so mentioned so often that it was overwhelming for me how much they struggled with that actually when we had offline education. And also class materials were available online. As a result, one of the components of the study was combining several questions and then finding if the students were pro-online or pro-offline, or what would they like to do with their education if we're still in this unstable situation where we need to keep making choice between endangering our loved people and between like having a higher level of education and easy access to education. And the results show that there is quite a high degree of polarization in the student body. So 19%, a little bit more than 19% of students are want the education to be strictly offline. They struggle with online classes. They hate the idea that they're isolated and lonely. They have some background factors that predetermine that they cannot be successful in online classes, and it's not their fault, it's just that they don't have a flat or a room or equipment or time or something like that. And then 26% of students, they're strictly for online courses, so they find that they have many more advantages. It's easier to combine them from work, with part-time jobs. They have favorable background conditions, and then the majority of students, 47%, almost 48%, they, as a result, their opinion is that the optimal form of classes right now would be a combination of several days of lectures and seminars online and several days of practical classes offline every week. So they all they say that practical instruction in English, for example, in the second language acquisition should be conducted offline, because that's and they need this connection to people offline. But at the same time, they say that they can afford several days to study online several days, because lectures and seminars are easier transferable into this form. So at this point, I'm going to conclude my presentation with a little picture here. So, you know, I used to think correlation implied causation, and then I took a statistics class. Now I don't. So it sounds like the class helped, maybe. So these results, they say that there are factors in the students' backgrounds that correlate with their perception of distance education, but it may highly be a variant that there is something else that we were missing. So I am very excited for the amount of meta studies studies which are springing up all over the world, and it's very motivating that colleagues in all other countries have the same experience, and they had the similar ideas independently of each other, because ideas just travel through heads. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alessia Alexeyevna. Now it's the question time. If my colleagues don't mind, I will start, because I have a comment first. It's interesting, we as teachers sometimes blame our students for not being diligent, but it might be just the kind of boots they wear, or that they're thinking about lunch. So it was quite interesting to see that even such factors affect their success, learning success. I have two questions, one a short one and the other maybe a bit longer. In what language was the survey conducted? And then if you did the study at a different time, like now, for example, do you think the findings might have been different?
So first question, the study was conducted in Russian because Russian is the official language of instruction at the university, and all the students speak Russian at a high level, because almost half of maybe a third of their education is courses in Russian, which are not connected with English language acquisition. Then if the results, I say that if the study was conducted in June 2020, when the general frustration with the fresh adaptation was so much higher, I am positive that we would have very different results, because probably less students would be in favor of online education. But because 2020-2021, this academic year, gave us, before that we had several months to get ready as professors before the new challenges. Our university had most of the classes, predominantly like 95% of classes, were online strictly according to the timetable, and the professors had time to develop new materials and adapt. So I guess that was the normative situation already, like it was not that much stress. And I believe after a few years, maybe next year, when we measure the same with a new body of students, there might be an extra factor that the students who are in first year now, they say that they compare the way university education is organized, they compare it with the way their school education was organized in distance learning. And university wins clearly, because schools struggled so much more, secondary schools especially. So I guess everything is learned in comparison, and right now we're in a pretty unique situation to measure that, if that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Professor Omar Adra, please.
Yes.
Actually, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Just like Olga said, I was thinking about my own students while you were presenting. And I something like maybe is worth exploring further. Do you think students from certain disciplines or coming from certain majors would have a different perception? Like, for example, and specifically, would science students answer differently from art students simply because the requirements of their course, the assignments, the types of the assignments, the general educational experience differs in a way? Or do you think this is not very relevant, the discipline or the major they come from?
Well, you know, the discipline might be relevant, because if you look at the publications in peer-reviewed journals, you see that it really depends, like the testing results depend, they correlate with the fact that some students have more scientific competence and technological competence, sometimes by extension, like IT students, for example. So they struggle less with the frustration when something doesn't work in a class. And then on the other hand, students, for example, who studied biology, they would feel like their education is not fulfilling its purpose because they don't have access to the equipment, which is a big part of their curriculum, learning to work with advanced scientific equipment, which they don't have at home, obviously. But I feel like it's much more, it more often correlates with the way education is organized, because students in the same discipline, like for example biology students in Oxford and students in biology disciplines in some, I don't know, Indian city or Chinese city or Russian city are going to have very different struggles compared to the students in the same major, but in a different part of the world, I guess. So it might be, there might be correlation, but we here have students who study to be Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Education in linguistics and in teaching English as a foreign language, and their experience is very much connected with what has been conventional to them a little bit before that. So they compare it with the previous year of education at the same university. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, actually. Thank you.
Do we have more questions from other participants? All right, then thank you, Alessia Alexeyevna. We will move on to the sixth presentation. I understand that one of the presenters had to leave, Abbas Ahmedskiy-Arabas. So Yanina Romanovna Andrushkevich will present. She's joining us from the University of North Carolina, the USA. She's a teacher assistant there and a postgraduate student at the university named after Kant. Yanina Romanovna, please.
Hello, dear participants. Hello from North Carolina. It's 5 a.m. in the morning. So I really struggle to stay focused. Okay, so I would like to share my screen and share my experience of teaching Russian language in the University of North Carolina. And my presentation is called Theoretical and Practical Aspects of Blended Learning in the Practice of Teaching Russian as a Foreign Language. So to start with, I would like to mention some differences between distance and blended learning. So considering the problem of differentiation of the concepts of blended and distance learning, it should be emphasized that the main differences lies not only in the amount of time spent in the online space and traditional learning environment, but also in the application of different methodology of learning activities. And in the process of distance learning, the technological equipment of students supplying them with digital educational content comes to the fore. And in the process of blended learning, special attention is paid to the harmonious and effective interaction of technological and pedagogical aspects and a competent change in the pedagogical approach. So there are a number of reasons for the move to blended learning. So Pete Sharma identifies time savings as a reason for the transition to a combination of formats in order to cover more material in one course, as well as to personalize learning for students with different needs. Some researchers also note that the increased need to combine a short learning time with the maximum amount of learning tasks, and some researchers believe that achieving the educational goals require much more time than the hours allocated for classroom work. So what are the benefits of blended learning? So the main advantages of blended learning before distance learning include the following features. Like first, it is the optimal relationship between traditional and electronic forms of learning. Second, the universality of using blended learning at all levels of education and all specialties. Third, the optimization of personal approach in learning. Fourth, the interactive format of learning allows transforming the role of student from object to subject of educational activity, forming so-called independent learning. An independent learner knows his goals and tasks, easily navigates in a virtual educational environment, knows the ways of organizing the course, control principles, and has a sufficient degree of freedom. But what are the challenges that we face in blended learning? So some researchers cite a number of factors that limit the use of blended learning, and these are technical difficulties, insufficient knowledge and skills of teachers in the use of technology, skepticism about the transition to blended learning, lack of time to study technological possibilities of teaching, and lack of quality online methodological resources for teaching Russian as a foreign language here. Next slide. What are criteria for electronic resources? So some researchers propose the following criteria for electronic resources. So first, they must be expediently used in educational process, must be rich and contain qualitative components, must correspond to the declared level, must be flexible in the learning path and allow for an individual approach, must provide tutoring support, must meet standards of ethic and morality, and must be accessible. Some researchers, some electronic resources for Russian as a foreign language in 2021. During my research, I found a lot of resources being declared in different papers, but some of them were not functioning anymore in 2021. So here is a list of actual resources that do work for 2021, and I think the main resource is from our Alexander Pushkin State Institute. I think it's the biggest resource. Also some courses from Russia Today, from St. Petersburg State University, and so on and so forth. So what are challenging with these electronic resources? Some researchers find out that the authors who were conducting this research note that resources on the websites of state universities meet standards of teaching Russian as a foreign language, but some homegrown courses may contain linguistics and communicative deviations and even violations of morals or ethics. So we should be careful while choosing or providing some additional resources for our students. What are general recommendations for optimizing blended learning? These are: give the material within the norm and do not try to concentrate it as much as possible in the lesson, because this reduces motivation. Follow the logic of the lesson and minimize comments on the technical side of the lesson. Use non-cognitive components of the lesson for motivation. Remember the learning support of students and take into account the native language of students and use it as an advantage. What are the typology challenges? So the solution to the question of typology of blended learning models offered in the studied publication can be conditionally divided in two types. So first, it's like own variants of model classification by different researchers. And second is the use of Staker and Horn model and making their own variation on that. So the Staker and Horn model is the most popular model of blended learning that includes 4 models: rotation, flag, self-blended, enriched virtual model, and so on and so forth. So let's move forward. And to end up my presentation, I would like to say that introduction of new technology must be accompanied by research to measure its effectiveness, describe it, and identify successful strategies and challenges in its implementations. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Yanina Romanovna. Now, question time. Please, questions from the participants.
Thank you for the report, and I have a question about the practice. This article is the literature reviews. This report is a literature review more or less, but also you are probably doing it with something more in mind, like with measuring something or going somewhere. So would you elaborate a little bit on the further discussion on the further potential of what you are talking about today?
Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, I'm just here for my 4th month in the university, so it's I think it's too early to discuss the blended learning experiments, the result of this experiment, but yes, it's in progress, and it's easy for us to do because last year it was totally digital learning, totally online, and this year we adopted the model of blended learning, and we meet with students both online and offline, and I think next year I will be able to present the results of this study.
Are you by any chance connected with the Fulbright program or any other?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm doing my Fulbright program here.
It is always very nice to see a fellow Fulbrighter in the field. But I also have a question then. So right now, the University of North Carolina has blended learning. And what does it mean for Russian language classes? Like how many classes a week with which groups do you have offline and online? Mm-hmm.
In North Carolina, we have courses for the beginners, so first semester and second semester, Russian 1 and Russian 2, and 2 classes are online, 2 classes per week for different groups. And as a teacher assistant, I also provide classes offline, also 2 times a week. And we also do extracurricular activities and Russian club, where we also meet face-to-face, just in the course of culture, not language.
Thank you for answering the question. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you think, and what follows from your research, are there some activities that are better suited for online learning and other activities for face-to-face learning? Or does it depend on the creativity of the teacher and anything can be transformed and go one way or the other?
Yes, I agree that it depends on teacher, but I would like to say that students really, my students who are just beginners, they really struggle with pronunciation. And for them, I think it's really hard to hear from online, from digital tools, hear the speech and the sounds. And it's better when we meet face to face, and then they can hear it better and they can reproduce the sounds better. And in terms of phonology, some tasks that are better online is, I think, our discussion boards. And we work in LMS called Canvas, maybe you know this, and we have discussion boards for some topics, cultural topics like history of Russia, places to visit in Moscow, and they just present, make their little presentations there and discuss, leave comments with their peer students. And I think it's better to do online because they have more opportunities and they can see all their peer reviews and they can comment on each other like in social media. So I think they really like this type they're familiar with.
And one more question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So I got quite curious about the resources that violate ethical standards. Could you please give examples of those?
Oh, yes. Sometimes some authors have their own opinions and so vision, especially if they are not Russian speakers, so for Russian language. And I guess I came across some examples with vodka drinking or smoking and something like this. So it was not very correct to put these samples in the course.
You mean sweeping generalizations that might be politically incorrect, maybe towards a certain nation?
Maybe there exists, but I didn't really came across like anything like this. But I will have a look more closely. Maybe it's thank you. It's very interesting question. Maybe I can find something like this. I'm sure.
Thank you. Other questions? Alessia Alexeyevna, I think that's it. We don't have any more presenters today.
Yes, we had one more speaker on the list, but he apologized that he had to leave early because of the class, and there was a little misunderstanding with the conference program. So this is the last report, the last presentation for today, and we feel we can conclude the session.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for thought-provoking presentations that generated interesting, engaging discussions, and the conversation will continue in the form of articles published in the conference proceedings and the journal that the Novosibirsk University publishes. Thank you all.
And on behalf of the host institution of the university, I would like to congratulate everybody on the successful second day of the conference. And we are a very young, small, very proud conference, which is going to develop into something much bigger, I hope. So I would really love to invite you all to join next year. It is going to be annual, and hopefully one time at some point we're going to be able to see each other in person. And it was such a miracle today, such a miraculous, magical feeling that none of us actually have English as their native language, but because we are brought together by teaching English as a second language or teaching Russian as a second language, we are able to communicate, and we all share the same struggles and the same problems, and we had very similar global experience which united us a lot. So my special thanks, gratitude is to Olga Leonidovna Fleonova, who was hosting this part of the conference, and you're a wonderful co-chair, and we hope to have you again next year and for many more times after that. Thank you very much. We are done.
Thank you, and thanks to all.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
okay.
Goodbye.
Yes, our moderators can release the conference. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
I think I will wait a little bit for our speaker who didn't appear, because if he appears, I'm going to inform, or maybe I will write him an email, because
Yes, he said in 1 hour and a half he will have free time. Well, I will wait with you, but it was let's check when he wrote to us.
I think it is half an hour later, so probably I will just, we can really dismiss this session, and I will write him an email that we sadly finished, and we invite him to join again next year, because his publication is submitted anyway. He's already the participant. It was just, there was a little misinterpretation on his behalf and on our behalf, I guess.
Right, it was at 11:08. That's what I have. I don't know what time. Yeah, now it's 12:21.
Yeah, still a lot of time to wait for. Yeah. It is so amazing to me that Lebanon has such an interesting university. I was reading about it yesterday because I was trying to see all the participants and where they are from, and it was blowing my mind that somewhere in the world there is a university that teaches in English people who have Arabic as their native language, and there is a big Russian program there too, which is surprising.
Well, I wouldn't say there's a big Russian program. There are courses in the catalog, but normally it's one course per semester, or sometimes even one course, beginner's Russian course, one course per year. But yeah, they also offer Spanish and Chinese as part of the electives. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's been badly hit by the economic crisis. I don't know how much you heard about from the news about it.
I heard quite a lot because I was so shaken up by the explosion in Beirut last year, and I tried to follow the events after that. And the political crisis and the economic crisis. It's like so frustrating, probably, to be in the middle of that.
Yes, and that's a very unique education environment here, because students have difficulty with electricity, Wi-Fi, 3G that providers give them per month is insufficient, and they cannot come to the university because the price of the gasoline. So they're caught in between so many challenges and difficulties, and yet
Teaching in the middle of a catastrophe is very experimental.
Yeah, catastrophe teaching, maybe. That's a new topic.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm going to turn off today and write an email.
Yes, I would like to thank you for this virtual collaboration. I think it was successful. So
It's a pleasure.